pleasure to have you here, and I hope you will enjoy this conversation with us. Thank you very much. Welcome to a meeting dedicated to the theatre of Susanne Kennedy, the director from Germany, who came here by invitation of the Hellenic Festival and to this workshop by It's our first collaboration with State of Concept, the space we are in here, and I'm extremely happy to see so many of you tonight, because I know it's very hot and that you found your way here. It's a big effort, so thanks for coming. Before I give the word to and the floor to Jans Moskos, theatrologist and director himself, Susanne Kennedy, theatre director, and Stefan Diekmann, professor for media and cultural studies and head of the Institute for Media at the University of Hildesheim, I would like to thank some people. Once the Hellenic Festival and its artistic director, Vangelis Theodoropoulos, as well as Caroline Buchleichter, who will join us in a minute. She's responsible for the international program, in which framework Susanne Kennedy came to Athens for the first time. I'd also like to thank Daniel Wetzel, who is not here yet. He is the founder and also the runner of the Apparata team, the space where we have a workshop which will be guided by Stefan Diekmann, which goes a bit more into the details of Susanne Kennedy tomorrow, but this is by registration, so I don't know who of you has registered for it. It will start at 10 o'clock in Apparat, not very far from here. The performances will take place on Thursday and Friday, and I wish you a wonderful conversation. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Κυρίες και κύριοι, αγαπητοί φίλοι, meine Damen und Herren, liebe Freunde, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are going to speak in English in order that everybody we have a common language. So I'll begin in English. Welcome to this discussion with Director Susanne Kennedy and Professor Dr. Stefan Diekmann. The Goethe Institute and the Hellenic Festival had a wonderful idea to introduce Susanne Kennedy to the Greek audience and to organize this meeting just before the shows in Piraeus on 4th and 5th of July. I want to thank both institutions for giving us the opportunity to sit across these two important ladies for German theatre. Luckily for us, the artistic director of the Hellenic Festival, Vangelis Theodoropoulos, and the curator, Caroline Buchleichter, selected for the current program of Athens Festival the production The Virgin Suicides, based on the novel by Jeffrey Pianidis, a co-production from München Kamstil and Volksbühne Berlin. It was time for the Greek audience to see the work of Susanne Kennedy, an important director of the German stage, whose work is widely acclaimed in Europe. Recently, in 2017, she was awarded the Euro Prize for Theatrical Realities. In 2014, she was named Young Director of the Year by the magazine Theater Heute, and was also awarded the Friesat Prize of Theater Treffen in 2014. Ms. Kennedy is currently an associate director in Volksbühne Berlin. She was born in Friedrichshafen, Germany in 1977 and studied direction at the Hochschule für die Künste in Amsterdam. She debuted on the Dutch stage with a series of productions and returned to Germany in 2009, where she has been working since then in various German theatres. Her innovative theatre works borders on installation, and as described in her resume in the site of Volksbühne, Director Susanne Kennedy responds to the new balance of power between bodies, technical objects and machines with an aesthetic that is beyond the human, distorted by masks, playback dialogue, doppelgangers with multimedia. The actors confront the audience with a post-humanistic subjectivity. I won't get into more details. The most suitable person to speak about the work of Susanne Kennedy is Dr. Stephanie Dickman, an estimated professor who currently teaches media studies and image theory of Hildesheim University in Germany as head of the Institution for Media, Theatre and Popular Culture. I think we are all looking forward to hear the two ladies and to know more about Susanne Kennedy, an artist whose work I've heard and read a lot about, but haven't the opportunity to see. I've seen a fraction of her latest production in a showcase of the 10th American Camera Speed in March 2019, where Susanne Kennedy showed the 21st minutes of her latest production called Three Sisters, based on the play by Anton Chekhov. And I must say, although it was a work in progress, I was truly fascinated. And I'm eager to know more about her artistic work. Dear Susanne, dear Stephanie, we are very happy to have you both here with us.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all. That is the festival, the space, the Goethe Institute, Stephanie Peter in particular, and thank you for agreeing to have this talk with me, because we haven't discussed your work personally until now, and those first encounters can be a bit tricky. Speaking of tricky, the job tonight is quite easy because there are going to be two talks here in Athens. There's going to be another one on July 4th, that is a post-performance talk after the first performance of the Virgin Suicides at the Athens and Epidaurus Festival. And that will be about the Virgin Suicides mostly, and it's going to be conducted by Yannis and Susanne. So my idea for the talk tonight was that we would rather discuss your work before and after the Virgin Suicides, and try not to anticipate too much of what is probably going to be discussed the day after tomorrow. Well, when I was preparing for this interview, this talk, I decided that I would first look at how others have been interviewing you, and I stumbled across this interview you did in Vilnius about a year ago, when you were also talking about your beginnings as a director. And what struck me there was that you spoke quite frankly and openly about how those beginnings weren't easy, and how it took you quite a long time to find out what was important to you as a director, and what you wanted to do in the theatre, and what your theatre work should look like. And I was wondering, could we, to get this talk started, go back to those beginnings, and could you tell us a little about how you came to find what may now be called your specific style or voice in the theatre? How did that all start?
Yeah, so if we go back to the beginnings, I mean, there was a long period where I was in sort of not knowing where I was going, actually. In my 20s, it was all a big mist, I have to say. I thought I wanted to be an actress, and then I didn't get accepted, and then I thought, okay, maybe I should try directing, but I didn't know anything about it actually, so I gave it a try, and they nearly didn't accept me also at school, because
at the home school?
Yes, at the directing school, because I did an audition, and there I already started to work so much on an actor. I wanted him to, in the audition, I wanted him to smile in a special way, and I was not satisfied with how it went, so I sort of really started to work on him, but in far too much detail, and this was not this was not sort of the accepted form, because they wanted to, you know, have me work on a scene or something like that, and I couldn't get past this strange smile of this guy, so they nearly didn't let me pass to the next round, and then they said, okay, if this guy can come back, she can come back too, so that's how I got into the next round. And so, but that was something kind of telling, that the details always were very, very important to me, and sometimes I got stuck on them, so I couldn't move forward. I was sometimes, you know, in the beginning of a scene, I couldn't get further because I was so trying to get it right, or to get it in a special way, which I had in my head. And that in school didn't work out really well, I have to say. It was more neurotic in a sense than it was very generous. And in the beginning, being with actors was quite scary for me, because, I mean, being a director is a very strange thing, especially in the beginning, if you have no idea about how to deal with people and groups, and you have to have a vision, and you have to organize a rehearsal and everything, and that. So in the beginning I played being a director, and that wasn't such a nice state to be in. So actually it was only after school that I started to, when I really had the time to get back and study, I have to say, really get back to my own room and read the literature that interested me, and especially about artists that interested me, that I could start to find a way, sort of formulate for myself what it is that I wanted. And then it slowly started, but if I look at the beginnings, it was very, I would say, kind of classical theater. I mean, the form really...
We'll look at that in a moment.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't call it so classical, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But I think it's important to hear that it took you a while, and that there were those obsessive, neurotic moments you've just been talking about, because from a spectator's point of view, and I know your work mostly or only from the perspective of a spectator, everything seems to have happened very quickly and very effortlessly. I mean, you presented your work in your first production at the Kammerspiele in Munich in 2011. 3 years later, you already were at Theater Treffen, and the year after that as well, you received several awards. Basically, right after you started working and presenting your work in Germany, and that is of course quite overwhelming and impressive. So hearing that, no, actually the beginnings weren't that easy is probably quite important or interesting to know for some in the audience as well. So what I've been trying to do is to find online some documentation of your early work of about 10 years ago. Work you presented in the Netherlands, because this is where your career actually started. You worked in The Hague and Amsterdam, and I discovered or downloaded 2 short clips which I would like to show now. Both are, well, one is an excerpt from the production Over Dieren, that is about animals, something you did in 2010, I think, and the other is a teaser for a production called The New Electric Ballroom, which was done a year earlier. And I'll just show these to the audience, and we'll comment upon them a little afterwards, because to me, a number of elements that, thank you, are important or are part of your work seem to be present there already. So let's just look at the small clips. Montage of a few excerpts from About Animals, based on a play by the Austrian playwright Elfriede Jelinek, who is probably known to most of you.
kunt laten staan. Die je moet reserveren zijn de beste meisjes. Dat zijn zeker momenteel de beste meisjes. Ze komen uit Litouwen, waar het beste cultuurmengsel wordt vervaardigd en verhandeld. Ik laat mij nu ook reserveren, maar niet als handelswaar verhandelen. Misschien verhoogt dat mijn waarde, mijn aantrekkingskracht jammer genoeg niet, omdat ik nog altijd hier ben. Is trouwens uitkleden gewenst of wordt dat deze keer niet voor gekozen? Een soort echt orgasme en mij niet erg. Ik ben zijn aanwezigheidsdienares. Maar hij ziet me helemaal niet. Haar cue is altijd schreeuwen wanneer ze echt herfachtig geloof ziet. En dat doet ze nu.
Okay, let's stop it here. And a teaser for production a year earlier called The New Electric Ballroom. That's a play by the Irish dramatist Enda Walsh. And this is how the teaser, which is about a minute and a half long, looked.
We're home, home, and this is my room, and you're all here, and I'm not going to leave here ever, ever again, because I love you all, and there's no place like home, 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 and there's no place like home. 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 And there's no place like home.
And I'll stop it here and just tell you this goes on for another 30 seconds. So it's quite trying, and that is to me another continuous feature of the work. Your performances, your productions tend to be quite short. They are usually about 17 to 90 minutes in length, but boy, they can be long, or girl, they can be long, and repetition is very important. And so when I look at these excerpts, those brief clips, there are things that I find striking. First of all, the whole scenario is already quite static, so there's not a lot of going here and there on the stage, but there's a very centered organization and treatment of the stage and a static situation, and then your treatment of bodies or so-called characters is very denaturalizing. So we wouldn't for a moment think that these are so-called real people, but they're very stylized, they seem very programmed in a way. Also, their way of speaking is already alienated, and this is before you use playback, but you might tell us a little about how you worked with the speech 10 years ago. And what I find most striking, and you see it quite well in this short teaser, is that there already it's quite difficult to say where one character begins or ends and where the other one begins. So you dress them in a similar way. The blue suits in the earlier clip, the green dresses here. The hairstyle is very similar. The way they move can be similar. We have those pink ladies in the first clip that are all quite expressive or seemingly expressive in their gestures. So there is, I think, a sense of fluidity, of not clearly defined boundaries of those beings that you put on stage. And wherever you want to start, I'd be really interested to know, does this work seem very remote now, or are there still connections to the way you approach the stage and the theater and figures on stage today?
Well, for me it's quite difficult to watch these clips, so it's quite remote actually. But of course, what you describe is something that has been there from the beginning that I only developed further. But what I always find interesting is how the people on stage are described. Also what you say, that they're not like real people. But I find real people very strange. So I always think if you would watch a scene on the street and put it just like that on stage, it would be very strange indeed. So I always have the feeling that reality, the way I perceive reality in a sense is can be very, very strange, and also the way we talk, the way we communicate, the way we talk in half sentences or have silences, and our movements. I think what we perceive as natural on stage has nothing to do with that whatsoever. So that is something that has been following me in a sense, that I want to put on stage something that comes closer to a feeling that I sometimes have with reality. So it's not that I say, okay, now I want to make something very alienated or distant or make them very strange figures, but somehow to create an atmosphere where people in the audience have the possibility to be able to maybe reflect their own perception of reality in a sense. I think one of the most interesting comments I got was after a show of Women in Trouble, which I did at the Volksbühne in Berlin 2 years ago, and that was an older guy, and I don't think he liked it very much actually, but he said to me, I walked out of the theater and everything felt so peculiar. I don't know, the way I was walking towards my car, and suddenly my car felt strange, and I went and sat inside, and suddenly the concept of a car was suddenly very absurd, and I went and drove up to the stoplights, and that was suddenly so strange, and people around me, and that was something I found so fascinating, that theater can do something like this. Just for a moment open your own perception about reality and you question that. And that's something, I think with all art, it's something we have to constantly rediscover and re-ask ourselves. So it's more to do with that than that I say, okay, I have a special form I want, but more chasing after a feeling, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, and quite quickly, it does bring us to the question: what do we look for when we go to the theater? Are we looking for full-blooded, so-called full-blooded characters who seem to be perfectly at ease with themselves and are more or less, well, if not without contradictions, then still explicable, and characters that can be seen as personae in their integrity, and this is really not what your theater work seems to be about or seems to offer. And but what you're saying, full-blooded beings on stage, I don't see that in a theater. When I go to the theater, I don't see that. What I usually see is actors trying to pretend something that I do not believe. So I see actors pretending to walk, pretending to be, pretending to talk, just pretending. And for me, that was something so striking always that I could not buy into that. So I guess what we all accept as something, I mean, we're talking about theater, but we could just as well talk about reality in that sense. So it's, I mean, there's not so much difference in that. But so I had to start at the very beginning. How is someone on stage? How can someone stand there and people sit there watching this person, and how can this person be on stage? And there already so many questions arise. And so you have to start at the very, very beginning. And I think often people in theater, work in theater, they just skip all that and they dive straight into the content of the play, of what a character is saying, but all the other things are just, oh, that's how we do it, so that's how we always do it. No, I totally agree, and I think there's something quite desperate about this still ongoing attempt to fake emotions as if you were feeling them for the first time, or to act a play as if it was happening for the first time, because especially in classical theatre, in canon, we already know what has happened, we know what is going to happen to everybody. So theatre, in many ways, is a form of ghosting. And especially in this very short teaser, I find that whole dimension of ghosting quite present in the speech, especially in the treatment of speech. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, because it's going to be very important later on. You work with text and speech in a very peculiar way, but here already it's an unusual way of presenting text.
Actors would start to speak, and I hated it. It's I just could not. I could not. But I didn't have a language for it, so I tried to have actors speak in a very special way, like with certain rhythm or with some distance. I tried to create a distance between what they were saying and themselves. So I had a space I could get into, that it wasn't so closed in a way. But it was very difficult, especially when I worked in Holland, and then I went to Germany, and there it was really difficult, because actors have this training, a very specific kind of training of how to talk. And it's very much with a grand gesture, and you talk in a way that you can reach to the back of the audience, and it's very, and you talk with a lot of what I find air in your voice. So, and you push it, so it's a very outward movement. It goes from stage to there, and you push emotions with your voice. And that was something that always gave me the creeps. So I tried to talk to these actors, and I mean, I had to develop my own language in even communicating with actors about that. And in the beginning, I just could tell them what I didn't want, but I could not tell them what I wanted, and that was very difficult.
What did you tell them? Because you spoke about that as well in another interview I've been listening to, that although you were not at all sure about what you wanted to do in the theatre, you could be very firm and decisive about what you didn't want to see in the arts or on stage. So what was it that you didn't want and were not looking for?
Well, it was most of the theatre I saw. And then sometimes I had experiences in the theatre that sort of really shook me, and were often experiences where I didn't know whether I liked it or I didn't like it, where I couldn't place it. And that feeling was always very important to me, because that opened up something in myself where I thought, oh, I cannot open a drawer, put it in, and then close it again. I do not know what to think about it, and it makes me insecure in a way. And I actually have to say I like this feeling. So I tried to find out what that was. And I have to say I also often much more got it when I went to the movies. In theatre, often it didn't happen. So I also tried to find a movie-like quality in theatre, in the sense that there was tension. I think tension is a very big, important word for me, because often in theatre there's no tension, because the tension in space, in the sound, and in the image is just sort of it's just leaving the stage like this. I don't have the feeling that people really use the possibility of this space to create tension. So I want to create a kind of tension where everybody, and it destroys tension. So you have to find a technique how it can be quiet and still, but very exciting in a sense. And that's how I developed the playback also.
We'll talk about the playback in a minute. I'm just wondering, as a footnote maybe, what did you tell those actors at Kammerspiele Munich who were first so reluctant to speak text or treat text in the way you wanted to?
It was funny, because I had a friend at the time. She was an actress, Çiğdem Teke, a Turkish actress, And she had this quality of speaking also in real life. She was also in the Elfriede Jelinek play, and she was the one who did the No Place Feels Like Home. And it was as if she always had a kind of distance between herself and her words. So she would always carry her words in front of her, which would make it very intriguing for me to see what does she mean when she says that. So you can't interpret it directly, you kind of have to move around the words in order to find your own interpretation. So that's what I try to tell the actors, in a sense, is if you have to, as if it's something you wear in front of you, and then the speech itself becomes a kind of sculpture. And I also wanted it to be so open. Well, I worked a lot with actors looking audience directly in the face and then saying the text, but as if there was a space between them looking at me in the audience and saying the text, so that I as an audience got the feeling that they actually mean something else, or they're using the text to manipulate me, or they're trying to do something to me in a sense. They don't mean that, but I never intended it to be ironic. I didn't want that. So, but much more as if the actors would know something that I didn't know myself in the audience. So, kind of secret.
Yeah, and there's a certain sense of unease and discomfort and something that is being withheld all the time, although people speak. Let's look at this for a moment. I suggest that we switch to your use of playback and to one of the famous productions, or by now famous productions, you did at Kammerspiele Munich. And my suggestion would be that we see or watch the first 5 or so minutes of that production from what is vaguely a perspective from a seat in the audience. So I think that may convey the impression quite aptly. There are some cuts in between when we see the actors, or what once were actors, in close-up, but just let's look at it for a moment and see. Warum läuft Herr R. amok? Why is Mr. R running amok? A production based on a film by Rainer Werner Fassbinder and a film script.
Grüß Gott. Ich hätte gerne eine Platte.
little about the playback. How did that come into your work?
So it started with the production before that, Fegefeuer in Ingolstadt, which I started out just in a sense normal. The actors were doing their lines in the rehearsal room. And I had one scene where we said, okay, let's use playback, because I'm working together with a sound designer. He's very important for my work. And we said that was something that interested us. And we did one scene with playback, and it somehow worked quite well. Not perfect, but it was something that was interesting. And then someone said, why don't we do the whole play like this? And then after rehearsal, I went home and I didn't sleep the whole night. I thought, am I allowed to do that? Can you do that? I don't know if you know, really, this is a very funny question actually with being allowed to, but that's how you're trained, in the sense that certain things are not allowed, so you cannot do them. And I said, okay, if I'm not going to do it, it's out of fear, and then I have to stop altogether. So then I thought, okay, then I have to do the whole play with playback. And so I came back the next morning and said to the actors, okay, we have to do this. And then we went into the studio.
Just before you go into the studio, what did the actors say?
Well, I have to say I chose my actors this time carefully, because the production before that, I had more actors who were more divas, I would say. So for me there it was difficult to get across what I wanted, and I was a young director, and I felt, okay, especially with young male actors, they felt they looked stupid when I asked them to do, and there was a lot of tension there. So I thought, okay, next time I'm going to choose people who are maybe not such who are open, but not the star, in any way stars of the company, and I'm going to try and work with them to really find out what I want to do. So a few of them were afraid, but I had one guy, he's now, he was like end of his 70s, now he's 80, Walter Hess, and he was the first to say, okay, let's go for it. So we went into the studio, they recorded their voices, and then the sound designer made a kind of composition, a partitur, so all the silences he put in. And then we went back to the rehearsal room, and it was quite difficult actually to get that right, because doing playback sounds easy, but it's not, because they need like perfect timing, and we only had the rest of the rehearsal time left to be able to get it across, and it needed to be perfect. Because if you're just
perfect would have been what exactly?
That you think the people are talking themselves. So, and we just got there in time for the premiere, and that was amazing because people in the audience didn't know it was playback. So what happened then is that you think people are talking on stage, but your body feels something's not quite right here. Because of course we recorded it in the studio, so it has a very sort of closed-in feeling to it, not at all what the theater space would sound like. And then, so you got this feeling of a closed-in space that comes from these bodies, but is not connected to this body, but your brain immediately connects it and thinks that's the way it is. So I think that was a very exciting space opening up, because people couldn't really trust their own perception, so they got a kind of uncanny feeling. And then after the premiere, which was actually a huge, that was quite an impressive night, because people were really, really booing and shouting and leaving in the end. That was
not here, but in the first.
Yeah, in the Fegefeuer.
By the time of Mr. R, they already knew what they were in for. And the person who was doing the playback.
Yes. So then the people wrote about it, and they knew and everything. And then that was, oh, she's doing playback again already. So it got from something that was sort of new to, oh, she's doing it again. It's quite interesting also. But so then the next step I did with this one is that it wasn't the actors' voices we did, but actually people who were not trained actors. We asked people just anyone who felt like doing it, basically. So there were also technicians from the theater, the parents of my assistant, it was from the financial department, it was friends of friends who said, okay, I have time this afternoon, I come to the studio. And very Bavarian voices also, and really not voices that sound like they are on stage, which I like very much, I have to say. So, and that was so much fun to do that, and also to rehearse it, because then the actors have to step into the voice, because a voice brings a body with it somehow, but it's this phantom body, so you have to step into this phantom body somehow and make it believable that you are this voice. And yeah, it was, and since then I never work without it anymore. At the moment, I cannot imagine ever working without it, to be honest.
And you do it amazingly, and still you can see, or sort of see, what it is doing to people's idea of theatre and how theatre should work, because a lot of theatre, even today, is the live performance of text. It's monologues and dialogues, and it's another way of sculpting text, which is what you describe as a form of bringing across emotions, but so much about the way theatre is written about. If I read reviews, there's always some comment about the actor who can speak or cannot speak, and about theatre as a form of speech performance, really. So you using the playback must have been, I think it is sort of evident how this must have been disturbing and annoying to people who were used to have their text and sometimes favorite text. I mean, Fegefeuer in Ingolstadt, Purgatory in Ingolstadt is sort of a Bavarian classic as well, and they would know this text. They would have been used to have it presented differently. So some of the anger is probably quite, or the disturbance, this is quite understandable. I found a very brief excerpt from that production. I'd just like to show it to give everybody an idea of how that looked.
Der eine Reuter ziert mit, der andere, der ist braun. Der Kutscher, der ist bucklig, die Radeln, die sind krumm. Und alle 5 Minuten, da fliegt der Wagen
So, I've been thinking about playback quite a bit, and it is my impression that it is, as a method, a procedure, far more complicated and disorienting than just splitting up body and voice, and putting voice here and the body there, and making it very obvious that they belong to 2 different, or maybe even 3 different characters or persons. Whereas the playback, and you described that already, is all about the desperate attempt of bringing together, of holding together body and voice, and that is maybe what makes it so uncanny and uncomfortable. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there are a lot of aspects to it. What I like a lot is that for me it creates space that I can move into, in a sense, because usually the voice has we cannot isolate the voice. The voice is only always a sort of content vehicle. So we immediately listen, okay, what's being said and what is this about? So it's always about content in that sense. And there, for me, it's a possibility to take a step back. Mm-hmm. And even though it's not in a rational way, it's more in a very, it's in a subtle way to work on perception that it can do something to you, but it opens up doors that are usually kept closed for me. And for me, I mean, it makes rehearsing very simple, I have to say. It's really, it's great. I mean, we have the composition of the voices, and I save a lot of time telling actors how to say something, so they just do it, and then we can be busy with other things that which I like a lot. So, and of course it does something to the body. You have to act in a very different way with playback. You cannot do your normal kind of acting routine with it.
Mm-hmm. Because playback already establishes a sense of remote control, of personae that are being steered from elsewhere, that are under some kind of control. But what exactly is this control? I agree, and playback is probably a very apt and reliable way of doing all that.
Yeah, I have more control, it's true, but of course, that is not so interesting in the end. I mean, it becomes interesting for us when we open up the space that is there, even if it's minimal. You have to go into the depth of that. It's not sort of broad in the sense that you can sort of jump about and shout and do whatever you fancy, but there's a few small space where you go into, and then you have to go deep into it. And that's the responsibility of the actors. So they have to find their own way within that. And in the beginning it feels like maybe, okay, oh, I'm not allowed to do anything. I feel like I'm closed in, and then the interesting research starts. So if an actor cannot get beyond that feeling, he or she is not getting anywhere. And that's really interesting to see how people find their own freedom within that. And then the freedom can be huge, but you have to take self-responsibility for that. And actors often like to give their responsibility to the director, and it seems in that sense that I take all the responsibility on me and I create the form and just put the actors in. But the responsibility lies somewhere else, and that has to be discovered by them.
Mm-hmm.
So I need people who understand that and who want to do that.
Did a mask that is being put on something that would otherwise fall apart and in the most hideous way?
I mean,
you like that?
I like it, yes. I go with it.
It's not a pleasant one, but to me it was rediscovering that film was sort of a key moment of understanding of your work to me. Because that film as well has been haunting me ever since I first.
Yeah, I mean it's the stuff nightmares are. What nightmares consist of. Of course, if you can't read the face and you can't get behind it, it's in that sense it is haunting.
Yeah, and just to show a few more screenshots, I think the mask really has been present ever since in your most of your productions, right? So here we have another very famous production from 2015 called Orfeo, based on, that may be the right word, the opera by Claudio Monteverdi, which you staged in a very unusual way, and you choose to describe the whole production as an operatic walk, an Opernparcours, an operatic walk, and you also introduced that subtitle that is certainly not Monteverdi's, that is eine Sterbeübung. In English that would be an exercise in dying. And just to give you a very brief impression, I suggest that we watch the trailer that was made when Orfeo was transferred from the Festival Ruhrtriennale, from which it was originally produced, to Berlin, where it was showing at Martin Gropius Bau, which is actually more of an exhibition space and museum. And the trailer looked like this. Very early productions, like the one you did on Jelinek, Overdieven, or the Electric Ballroom by Anne de Walsh. Those are plays in which the catastrophe, the bad thing, has already happened long ago. So everything is being spoken about and addressed in retrospect and from somewhere after. And this the strange temporality of the somewhere after or afterwards, but not quite finished, is very present in many of the productions you have done. So there's always this idea of aftermath, after the catastrophe. Whatever happened, something already has happened, which is of course the basic situation in theatre. Some of the more interesting contemporary theatre theory has stressed the fact that, of course, we already know what will have happened once the performance is over. We already know that by the end, everybody dies in Hamlet, lovers die in Romeo and Juliet, Gretchen dies in Faust. So theatre is a place of Wiedergänger, of the undead, of ghosts, and we have that. Only your ghosts are still very material. I mean, let's just look at the masks for a moment again. Those are ghosts that are about to vanish into thin air, but still, what has happened, Eurydice is dead. You just cannot let go. And the sisters, the virgin suicides are dead, but the boys are still talking about them. So very often we have this afterlife, this limbo, this in-between zone. Is that maybe the space of theatre? Is that where you want to take theatre? The proper place of theatre, maybe?
I'm very much interested in that in-between space. And where that exactly is, I myself also don't know. If it's somewhere in between life and death, or after death, or if it's even in reality itself, that there are spaces that we cannot experience because we're just busy with our everyday life so much. I think it's all there at the same time, and in that sense, theatre creates a possibility to stop for a moment and be in the dark and be there and have that time, sometimes maybe 2 hours, shorter or longer, and be able to go somewhere else. That you're, I mean, it's not that only theatre can do that. There are all kinds of possibilities to get there with, I don't know, meditation, drugs. If you experience trauma or something horrible happens to you, and then in that moment, suddenly space and time becomes something very different altogether, and everything becomes very relative, and you see your perspective on reality can change very much. So that's something I want to explore with theatre, and make it possible that we have a space where we can meet and find each other again, and maybe ask questions about the things we take so much for granted or do not even think about, and open up something in that.
Mm-hmm. I'm beginning to think that in this way, or in this sense also, it makes sense that your productions tend to be quite short, as 70 minutes, 80 minutes in length, so they are more modeled on the idea of the interval. It's not the entire evening or the entire night, it's not the full 5 hours, not the full 2 hours, but there's an interval.
Yeah, it's also very much to do with the technical aspect of it, because
sure
we're actually, every second on stage is worked on. Mm-hmm. So there is not, because we, like, every movement, every just move from this sentence to the next is something we work on. Mm-hmm. So to even get to 90 minutes is quite an amount of work we have to do, because it's also scripted in a sense. So we don't, there's no in that sense, oh, the next 5 minutes we're just going to do that and there's being improvised. It doesn't exist with us. So that's also why we need a lot of time to do 5 minutes. We need so much time to be able to do it. It's like with film in a way. We're actually doing a montage on stage while we're rehearsing all the time. Mm-hmm. That's how we work.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then only time I did a longer play was with Women in Trouble, and there we had the revolving stage turning, and we set the revolving stage to a certain pace, and then the stage dictated how long it would take. So, because every room that came, we had a scene in that, and then it took so long till the next room came, and then it took a long time, so then it was 2 hours, mostly, yeah.
2:30.
Or 2:30 even, yes.
To wrap this up, I would suggest that we look at this revolving stage for a moment, because revolving stages are beginning to play quite an important role in your work. By now there are 3 of them, as far as I've been counting. There's Coming Society, there's Hideous Women, and there's Women in Trouble. And I'd like to leave a little time for questions from the audience. So, yeah, if everybody's all right with that, we'll look at